The elegant reception hall fell silent. Every whisper died. The soft clinking of champagne glasses ceased. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, stood rigid, her silk dress rustling with suppressed fury. Her face, usually so composed, was contorted with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. My father-in-law, Richard, watched with a smug smirk, confident that he controlled every outcome. He thought he knew exactly what was about to unfold. Then, my son, Leo, tall and impossibly proud in his pristine army uniform, began to walk. He moved with an unwavering purpose that belied his young age, his polished boots clicking precisely on the polished marble floor. He ignored the flashing cameras of the society photographers. He bypassed the row of beaming dignitaries. He even walked straight past his grandparents, who were positioned prominently in the front rows, their expressions shifting from expectant smiles to bewildered frowns. He found me standing near the back, near the discreet service entrance, just where I always stood at their lavish events, a self-imposed exile, an attempt to minimize the sting of their disdain. He didn't even glance at anyone else. His eyes, so deep and resolute, so heartbreakingly like his father's, locked onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. He stopped directly in front of me. His hand, steady and strong, reached into his uniform pocket. It pulled out a shining, heavy metal, suspended from a pristine ribbon. The light caught it, making it gleam like a miniature sun. "For the woman who taught me strength," he announced, his voice clear and resonant, amplified by the silent room, filling every corner of that grand space. "For the woman who never gave up, even when they tried to break her. This is yours, Mama." His hand reached out. His fingers, gentle but firm, pinned the gleaming metal onto my simple navy dress, right over my heart. The cold metal pressed against my skin, but it felt like fire, like a brand of truth. A collective gasp, loud and undeniable, rippled through the entire crowd. Evelyn's painted face, usually so impassive, drained of all color. Her eyes went wide, reflecting the glittering chandeliers above. She gasped, a small, choked sound, like air escaping a punctured lung. Then, like a marionette with cut strings, her body went slack. She collapsed. Her ornate chair rattled loudly as Richard lunged to catch her, his face a sudden mask of horror. My husband, David, was everything to me. He was my anchor, my confidant, my quiet rebellion. We met at the city library. We were both struggling students, working part-time jobs to make ends meet. He studied literature, dreaming of stories and words. I studied nursing, driven by a quiet desire to help. We shared simple dreams, a small apartment, a life built on books and kindness, maybe a tiny garden on a balcony. David envisioned starting a small publishing house, focusing on local, unheard voices, giving a platform to writers who otherwise might be overlooked. I supported him completely. His parents, Evelyn and Richard, operated in a different universe. They owned a multi-million-dollar real estate empire, their names etched on skyscrapers across the city. They expected David to join the family business, to wear their tailored suits, to play their corporate games. They had groomed him for it since he was a child, sending him to elite boarding schools, arranging internships in their towering offices. But David had his own path. He believed in stories. He believed in art. He believed in people. His parents hated it. They openly mocked his frivolous pursuits. They called his passion for literature a hobby that needed to be abandoned for real work. They barely tolerated me, seeing me as another of David's misguided, unsophisticated choices. When David died suddenly, unexpectedly, from a fast-moving, aggressive illness, a cruel twist of fate that ripped him from us in mere weeks, our world shattered into a million irreparable pieces. He was only 32. The funeral was a blur of polite condolences from strangers and cold, calculating stares from David's family. Evelyn and Richard were immaculate, dry-eyed, their faces sculpted masks of propriety. They didn't shed a single tear for their son. They only asked their lawyers who would now manage David's small publishing venture, a fledgling operation that was losing money, as if it were a minor inconvenience, a loose end in their perfect financial portfolio, not the tangible legacy of their dead son. A week after the funeral, Evelyn summoned me to their opulent penthouse, a marble and glass monument to their wealth. She didn't offer comfort. She offered terms. "You're young, Maya," she said, her voice like ice, utterly devoid of warmth. "You can find another man. Go back to your father's rundown apartment. We don't need a distraction." She meant me. She meant Leo, our 6-year-old son, David's only child. They blocked my access to David's small savings, claiming it was tied to their business, tangled in corporate legalities, locked away with their assets. I had no job. My nursing degree was still fresh, but I had no experience in a hospital setting, only theory. No money. No support. Just Leo. And the cramped, one-bedroom apartment my father had left me in the older, forgotten part of the city. We had nothing but a few boxes of David's beloved old books and a suffocating blanket of shame that their words had woven around me. Life became a daily battle for survival, a relentless grind that chipped away at my spirit. Evelyn and Richard made sure everyone in their elite circle knew I was the one who couldn't keep up. They skillfully controlled the narrative. They whispered about me at charity galas, at country club events, at their exclusive family luncheons. Rumors spread like wildfire through their social networks. Poor David, they'd lament with a performative sigh. He married beneath him. Such a tragedy, leaving behind such a dependent wife. They painted me as a gold digger, a burden, a woman utterly incapable of managing her own life, let alone raising their grandson properly. The sheer injustice of it burned within me, a quiet ember of fury I had to suppress for Leo's sake. I worked 2 cleaning jobs, sometimes 3, just to pay the meager rent on our tiny apartment and put meager food on the table. My hands ached, raw and chapped from harsh detergents. My back screamed with persistent pain from endless scrubbing. I rode crowded, stifling city buses for hours each day, from one sprawling office complex to the next, smelling perpetually of stale cleaning products and disinfectant. I'd wear my worn-out sneakers, the soles thin and flapping, from endless walking through the city streets. I saw the looks. The disdain. The way people's eyes would linger on my worn clothes, then quickly dart away. At a family gathering they begrudgingly allowed us to attend, a meticulously planned Christmas Eve dinner at their sprawling city mansion, they sat us at a small, wobbly card table tucked beside the pantry in the kitchen. It was away from the glittering dining room, where the family patriarchs and matriarchs held court under crystal chandeliers. "It's for the staff," Evelyn purred, her smile tight as she gestured vaguely, "and those who help the staff. You understand, dear, it's just more practical." Leo, then 8, squeezed my hand under the table, his small face tight with hurt, his eyes welling slightly. He understood what she meant. He saw their disdain. They never spoke to me directly about my life, never asked how I was coping. Instead, they'd make loud, pointed comments to other relatives, loud enough for me to hear every word. "Look at Maya's shoes," Evelyn would say to her sister, tapping her own designer heel on the polished floor. "Still wearing those worn-out sneakers. Some people just can't adapt to proper city living, can they? Or, Leo needs better schools. That public school in her neighborhood won't teach him anything useful. He needs proper exposure to the right kind of people." Their words were small, sharp daggers, designed to chip away at my self-worth, to remind me of my place, to make me feel inadequate. Leo studied under a single dim bulb in our tiny living room, its light barely reaching the corners of the cramped space. The plaster on the ceiling sometimes flaked onto his homework, onto his books. He'd wear hand-me-down clothes, often too big or too small, given by distant, pitying relatives who thought a charity case was their only way of interacting with us. He never complained. He was a quiet child, but intensely observant. He saw my tired eyes, the lines etched by exhaustion. He saw their judging glances. He saw how I straightened my shoulders each time their cruel words reached me. One summer, at a family picnic by the lake, another of their performative acts of inclusion, Evelyn made a show of buying new designer swim trunks for her other grandchildren. She handed them out with fanfare, their bright colors a stark contrast to Leo's faded, patched pair. She deliberately ignored Leo, pretending not to see him. Leo just pulled his old, faded shorts tighter. He went to play near the water alone, a solitary figure. Their scorn was a constant shadow, following us through the city streets, reminding us of our place, our perceived inferiority. It pushed us deeper into our own small world, a world where our only true wealth was our fierce love for each other. The school Leo attended was good, a decent public school in our district, but it was nothing compared to the elite private academies David's parents sent their other grandchildren to. Leo sometimes came home quiet, his usual spark dimmed. "Kids asked why I don't have new sneakers, Mama," he'd once mumbled, kicking at a loose thread on the carpet. My heart ached, a sharp, physical pain. I wanted to give him everything. I wanted to shield him from their snobbery, from the judgment of a world that valued labels over character. But all I had was my grit. "You're strong, Leo," I'd tell him, pulling him close. "Your shoes don't define you. Your heart does. And your mind." I tried so hard to shield him from their cruelty, but the constant drip, drip, drip of their disapproval was hard to ignore. They invited us to only the biggest family events, the ones they knew we couldn't easily refuse, especially if we wanted to maintain any semblance of a relationship with David's extended family. It was their way of showing us off, their way of demonstrating their selective charity, their way of reminding us of our dependent, lower status. Each event was a fresh humiliation, a new opportunity for them to highlight our poverty, our lack of class. I'd stand awkwardly, trying to be invisible, blending into the background, while Evelyn would introduce me to her friends as David's widow. Poor dear. Such a struggle, raising a child alone, isn't it? Her tone dripped with a false sympathy that only served to highlight her thinly veiled contempt. They never offered tangible help. Not a single cent. Not a kind word of genuine comfort. They acted as if David's death was my fault, a stain on their impeccably polished family name, an inconvenient disruption to their perfect lives. They even changed their phone number without telling me, forcing me to rely on formal invitations for any news or updates about family gatherings. The emotional toll was immense. I often cried myself to sleep after Leo was asleep, exhausted, defeated, feeling the crushing weight of their judgment. But every morning, as the city woke around us, I found a new resolve. I would not break. Not for David. And certainly not for Leo. I would rise. The final straw, the incident that snapped something deep inside me, came on a sweltering summer afternoon. Leo, then 16, found me crying quietly after a particularly humiliating encounter with Evelyn at a family luncheon. This one was held at an exclusive rooftop restaurant overlooking the city skyline. I had tried to talk to Evelyn about a scholarship opportunity for Leo, something that could open doors. She had cornered me in the ladies' room, away from the glittering eyes of her friends. "Maya," she'd said, her voice barely a whisper but sharp as glass, cutting through the polished silence, "you know, David always worried about you. He worried you'd be a burden on him. He worried you couldn't stand on your own 2 feet without him, that you'd be a drain. It seems he was right. Perhaps it's best if you stop trying to climb. Just accept your place." My breath hitched. The words were a cruel, calculated lie. David had loved me fiercely, completely, without reservations. He saw my strength, not my supposed weakness. But her words, delivered with such venom, twisted a knife in my heart, designed to inflict maximum pain. When I returned home, I didn't just cry, I crumbled. I slumped onto our threadbare sofa, utterly defeated. Leo, usually so quiet and self-contained, saw. He sat beside me, his young face unreadable, but his eyes, so perceptive, held a steely glint I hadn't seen before. "Mama," he said, his voice firm, mature beyond his years, cutting through my despair. "I'm going to join the army. I'll bring you a pride they can never take away. A pride that shines brighter than all their money and their cruel words." I hugged him tightly, tears blurring my vision, staining his shirt. Part of me, the tired, beaten-down part, still thought it was just a boy's fleeting dream, a desperate wish to protect his mother, born of his anger. But Leo was serious. He spent every spare moment preparing. He trained relentlessly at the local park, running drills until his legs burned and his lungs ached. He climbed stairs in our apartment building, sometimes reaching the rooftop for extra sprints, looking out at the sprawling city, a world he was determined to conquer on his own terms. He studied late into the night, poring over military manuals, pushing himself relentlessly, driven by a quiet fire. He cut out pictures of soldiers, gleaming medals, and proud families from magazines. His small room, once filled with childhood toys, became a training ground, a sanctuary of ambition. He applied to the most prestigious military academy. He passed every physical, every mental test with flying colors, excelling where they expected him to fail. 2 years later, he was ready. A young man, strong and determined, he left for basic training. The apartment felt impossibly quiet, achingly empty without him. I worried constantly about his safety, a mother's unending dread for her child in a dangerous world. But beneath the worry, I also felt a flicker of hope, a warmth of quiet, fierce pride I hadn't felt in years. He was carving his own path, a path of honor and self-made dignity, far from their judging eyes. I cried every night for months after he left. Some tears were of loneliness and fear for his safety. But for the first time in a long time, some of those tears were of quiet, fierce, undeniable pride. My son, my burden, my disgrace, was becoming a man who would make the whole city proud. Last week, an anonymous invitation arrived in my mail. It was for the city's annual Heroes Gala, an exclusive, black-tie event honoring servicemen and women. It was held in the grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel, a place Evelyn and Richard frequented. I almost didn't go. I thought it was a mistake, a cruel prank perhaps, another opportunity for public humiliation. But something in my gut, a strange pull I couldn't ignore, told me to be there. I chose my best dress, a simple navy blue I'd bought years ago for a nursing interview, its fabric soft but a little worn. It was clean. It was pressed. It was humble, but it was mine, and it carried years of my own quiet battles. I found a seat near the back, near the discreet service entrance, hoping to be invisible, to simply observe from the periphery. The ballroom was immense, glittering with crystal chandeliers, filled with the city's elite. The air hummed with anticipation, the clinking of champagne glasses, the murmur of important conversations. Then, the master of ceremonies, a famous news anchor whose face graced billboards across the city, stepped to the podium. He announced a special commendation for outstanding bravery, a recognition of valor above and beyond the call of duty. And onto the stage marched a column of soldiers, their uniforms crisp, their movements synchronized. My heart stopped. My breath caught in my throat. Leading them, tall and resolute, his shoulders broad, was Leo. My son, in his immaculate dress uniform, medals already gleaming on his chest. He looked so much like David, strong and principled, but with a fierce, independent spirit all his own. He scanned the crowd, his eyes moving past the VIPs in the front rows, past the dignitaries, past the familiar, perfectly coiffed faces of his grandparents. His eyes found mine across the vast hall, unwavering, holding me in their gaze. He descended the steps, leaving the formation of soldiers, his path clear and direct. He walked straight toward me. Evelyn and Richard, just a few rows ahead of me, their faces usually so composed, showed confusion, then disbelief. They whispered to each other, pointing subtly at Leo, trying to understand this unexpected detour. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. He stopped directly in front of my chair. The entire hall watched in stunned silence. You could hear a pin drop. Every eye was on us. He stood at attention, his posture perfect. Then, he raised his hand. He saluted me. My son, a decorated soldier, saluting his mother, a cleaning lady in a worn dress. It was a gesture of profound respect, of honor. For the woman who gave up everything, he announced, his voice clear and strong, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system, echoing through the grand room, so I could stand here today. For the woman who never gave up, even when they tried to break her. For the woman who always showed me what true strength means. This is yours, Mama. He unpinned a gleaming medal from his own uniform, a medal I now recognized from the news reports, the Army Commendation Medal with V device for valor, for bravery in combat. He pinned it onto my dress, right over my heart. The cold metal pressed against my skin, but it felt like fire, like a brand of truth, searing away years of pain and shame. A collective gasp ripped through the opulent hall. The sound was like a wave, rising and falling, followed by a sudden, stunned silence. Evelyn's painted face, usually so impassive, drained of all color, turning a sickly pale. Her jaw dropped, exposing a flash of perfect white teeth. Her eyes went wide, reflecting the glittering chandeliers above, a raw, naked horror in their depths. She swayed, then crumpled into her chair, a small, muffled cry escaping her lips, like air escaping a punctured lung. Richard, her perfect, composed husband, rushed to her side, his own face a mask of shock and utter mortification, fanning her frantically with a program from the event. The people around them murmured, their whispers growing louder. Some stared at me, then at the medal. Some stared at Evelyn and Richard, recognizing the public humiliation. Others looked at Leo, then back at me, silently piecing together the unspoken history, the years of disdain. I stood still. I didn't flinch. I felt the weight of the medal. It was heavy, solid, real. It felt like every tear I'd ever shed, every extra shift I'd worked, every whispered insult I'd endured. My eyes locked with Evelyn's, even as she struggled for air, her chest heaving, her perfectly coiffed hair now slightly askew. I leaned in just slightly, just enough so that only she could hear my voice over the rising hum of the crowd. It was a quiet whisper, almost a caress, but it was filled with years of unspoken pain and quiet, absolute triumph. You called us a burden, I said, my gaze unwavering, holding her trapped gaze. My voice was calm, almost serene, utterly devoid of the anger I had carried for so long. A disgrace. You said we belonged in a cramped apartment, out of sight, forgotten. You tried to break me. You tried to break him. Now look, Evelyn. Look at what that burden became. She couldn't meet my gaze. Her eyes darted away, frantically searching for an escape, for a dark corner to hide in. Richard, red-faced and absolutely mortified by the public spectacle, quickly ushered her out of the hall, practically dragging her away from the gaping stares and murmuring crowd. The applause started then, tentative at first, a ripple, then growing, becoming thunderous, a deafening roar of approval that filled every inch of the ballroom. People clapped for Leo's valor. And they clapped for me. The story of Leo's tribute went viral. Not just locally, but nationally. The local papers, then national news channels and online platforms, picked it up. They featured Leo and me, the unsung hero and his resilient mother. Our story spread like wildfire across social media, a tale of triumph over adversity, a testament to a mother's silent strength, a son's unwavering loyalty. Headlines read, "Son honors mother who defied all odds," and "Medal for Mom, a hero's unforgettable tribute." Now, walking through the city streets, I see the difference. People nod, they smile, they stop me to congratulate me. Neighbors from our old apartment building, colleagues from my cleaning jobs who once barely acknowledged me, even some of David's distant relatives who had once shunned me, now approach with newfound respect, with apologies, with quiet admiration. The mayor himself personally called to invite me to a city hall luncheon, where he publicly commended my strength and Leo's bravery. Evelyn quickly recovered from her public collapse, but she never recovered from the public humiliation. She couldn't meet my gaze in the days, weeks, or months that followed. She never looked me in the eye again. Richard continued to avoid eye contact, always looking past me, as if I were a ghost. Their silence was its own kind of apology, a hollow, bitter admission of their grievous error. But I didn't need their apology. I had Leo. I had my peace. In my heart, I still remember. I remember the cold shoulders, the whispered insults, the times they avoided our street, their faces averted. I remember who laughed when I had nothing, and who crumbled when I had everything. Their empire continued, but their social standing in the city, especially among those who valued integrity, was subtly diminished. Leo is stationed overseas now, a decorated officer, leading his own unit. He calls me every Sunday, without fail, his voice strong and full of love. He sends money, insisting I stop working. "You've worked enough, Mama," he says, his voice full of fierce conviction. And I finally did. I retired from cleaning. With Leo's support and inspired by his selfless act, I opened a small community center in our old neighborhood, a place where single mothers can find support, free childcare, job training, and legal aid. We offer workshops on financial literacy, parenting skills, and emotional resilience. It's called David's Legacy, a quiet, living tribute to the man whose dreams were dismissed, but whose spirit of compassion and belief in the unheard lives on through his son and me. I finally feel seen, not just by Leo, but by myself. My worth is no longer tied to their judgment or my past financial struggles. It's tied to the heart I put into my son and the strength I found in adversity. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the burden, the outcast, or the one struggling in the shadow of others' judgment, please take a moment to like this video. Your support helps amplify these vital stories. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth is not measured by others' wealth or opinions, but by their character and their courage. Leave a comment below and tell me your story. Tell me about the moment you rose above the noise, the person who showed you your true strength, or how you overcame seemingly impossible odds. I read every single word, and your stories inspire me. And if you want more stories that speak to the heart of resilience and quiet triumph, remember this: the burdens of today can become the heroes of tomorrow. We are not defined by where we start or by the labels others try to put on us, but by how we stand, how we endure, and how we fight for those we love. Our battles are not always fought on a battlefield. Sometimes they are fought in silent acts of love, in tireless work, in quiet defiance against prejudice. And sometimes the victory is sweeter when it is witnessed by those who doubted you most, when the truth shines brightest for all to see.